for things. Is there anybody who has a question or observation?
Are you talking about
a lot of banging around, but just, is there anyone who has a question? Or
I'm kind of wondering myself about the mood that you go into, as in you're not in a very good mood when you sit down to meditate and it comes into the meditation. Is that the mood?
You say you're not in a good mood, but if you were to refine that, mindfulness of mind would want you to refine that mood. So let's talk about some of the potentials there. It's a good, so this is more or less where I wanted to have the conversation. Is there a mindset of desire? And if you guys are in the kitchen right now, I don't know if someone's in the kitchen, if you could just maybe are eating during our mindfulness class, or you could turn your phones off, because I'm trying to actually have a mindfulness class. My mood's pretty good. There's still noises in the background, but let's have a sincere talk about all of this, because I'm really trying to emphasize the importance of what it is that we're doing. That this is the backdrop for everything else that happens in your life. So instead of whether you're in a good mood, is there a mind of desire? Is there a mind of aversion? Is there a mind of, principally, again, I know there's many different states, but what is the predominant mood? So for example, when that talk that I was giving about walking down the street, what do you think that mood is when you're walking down the street and all of a sudden you end up with an ice cream in your hand, and then all of a sudden you find yourself looking at a shop window, and then all of a sudden you're in the shop and you're shopping. And I know that lots of different thoughts and emotions arise that you could be aware of during that time. But what is that mood? And that particular mood is what we would refer to as mindfulness of desire. That the overall state that you're walking around in, and you wouldn't normally, until you do a practice like this, you wouldn't normally recognize it. You're literally in the state, and everything that you're doing becomes influenced by that state. And most people don't recognize that they're in that state. I'll give you another example, if that wasn't clear enough. That is desire is the backdrop. And then everything you do, like reaching for an ice cream or looking in a shop window or actually entering into that shop, everything you do is colored. And maybe that's the best way to say it. Everything that you do is now colored. And it's like you have choice, you have free will, but it's almost like you don't. And people have a really hard time understanding what goes on. It's like they're walking around and they're unique individuals, a unique individual self with individual choices, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in these situations and they don't really understand exactly how it is they got there. Now, let's say the mindset, the overall predominant mindset, it's not that you're having emotions of anger, but you're having the overall mindset of aversion. Everyone you walk into, everyone you see, there's almost like some nasty thought that is associated with them. And everyone seems to be irritating you. Everyone seems to be getting you going. And it's like, if you were to say mindfulness of mind, it's literally mindfulness of whatever is the most predominant predisposition at any given moment. It's the strangest thing, because it's like all of your thoughts and all of your actions and even your emotions that you're about to have, anger, you're predisposed to anger and irritation and frustration when that is the backdrop. And when it comes to desire, same thing. If you have the mindset of desire, then everything that you do, everything, like the people that you see, the food, all of a sudden food is there. And you're just doing things and the backdrop for it. And do you have free will and do you have choice? Sure you do. But if you're not aware of this, that choice that you say is your choice, your freedom to do what you want becomes extremely limited as a result of this. And you can be aware of this without judgment. You can be aware of what the mood is, the overall lighting of the mind, the disposition. And you go into meditation, for example, and you know what the mood is. And that can be the overall predisposition of restlessness, of anxiety. You could have the overall backdrop could be peace. And I am literally saying that you could be at peace, you could be at ease as a disposition. And which one of those, in terms of mindfulness practice, peace, anger, desire, jealousy, which one from a mindfulness perspective do you think would be the best predisposition? And believe it or not, I'm sure you probably have an idea what I'm about to say, but believe it or not, none of those, none of the above would be considered to be better than the others. Mindfulness is about being aware of whatever the mood is, about being aware of whatever the disposition is, and then not succumbing to those moods, to be able to be aware of those dispositions and literally to be able to name them. Not just I'm in a good mood or I'm in a bad mood, but literally to be nuanced with regard to awareness of what the overall mood is. And I really want you to see that that's different than mindfulness of thoughts and mindfulness of emotions, which are by and large arisings, spontaneous or momentary arisings that are sometimes, often largely influenced by that backdrop, by that lighting, by that predisposition. So this is really different. This is being aware at all times, and you get to obviously get used to it in meditation practice. You become aware of what the backdrop is, the lighting at all times, and then not succumb, not be prone to being under its influence. But you have to be aware of it, and you have to be able to name it. You know, what is that? And not just I'm in a good mood or I'm in a bad mood, but like right now, let's give it a test. I know that there are thoughts, I know that there are emotions present, but what is your mood or disposition like right now? Let's take stock. Let's step back, let's take a moment, breathe in, breathe out, exhale. And I know you're breathing. I know there's lots of sensations. And I know there's some emotion. That is the backdrop, or that's in the foreground, and the backdrop for all of these arisings is what? What is that disposition? Is there sadness? Is there excitement? Is there peace? And see if you can recognize that disposition is without taking it personally, that I am in a good mood. I am in a peaceful mood. I am in a restless mood. None, see if you can step back and not say I am, but just recognize, for example, desire, desire, or aversion, aversion, or restlessness, restlessness, or peace, peace, or even love, love, and not get pushed or pulled into any of them, thinking that one is better than the other. So let's take a minute, please. What is the mindset? What is the disposition? What is the mood? Mindfulness of mind, please. And I understand that there may be subset dispositions, but what is predominant? And at first, this may be a little tricky for you. It's almost like when someone's really disembodied, and we talk about mindfulness of breathing. And a lot of people don't realize that they're even breathing to start with. And this is kind of like that. And then sometimes people, when they get used to they can start feeling the breath. I ask them, what is their length of the breath? Is it short, meaning above the solar plexus? Is it long? And they don't know the answer to that, even though they're breathing. And then they get used to that. And then I get a little more subtle with them. And I say, well, not just the length of the breath, but what is the temperature of the breath? And is the temperature of the inhalation different than the temperature of the exhalation? And is the beginning temperature of the inhalation different than the middle and the end temperature of an inhalation and exhalation? And so through practice, you start to gain nuance and subtlety, and what you could say even sensitivity to the breath, and then sensitivity to the body, and then sensitivity to sensations, because most people don't say sensations, they say all kinds of things. Pain, they have stories behind it. We talked about all this in previous weeks and meditated on these things. So here is the same thing. It's a subtlety of recognition that most people have difficulty with. It's why we teach it later. But I'm gambling with you. I think you can do this. And the question is, with regard to disposition, can you get to that level of subtlety? Like if I ask you, what is the texture of your breath right now? Is it fine? Is it coarse? Is it rough? Is it choppy? Is it smooth? What is the temperature of your breath? In the same way, can I ask you to look without judgment, without trying to reject anything or accept anything or trying to change it in any way? What is the current predominant predisposition? And it may not be the same as even was a minute ago when I asked this question. Mindfulness of mind. Okay, so you have this idea, you have this concept down. Now let's go a little further with it. Are there just underneath the predominant disposition that you noticed, are there any, maybe one or two other subsets that you can be aware of? Well, again, without judgment. Let's see if you can do that. If not, it's okay. I just want to gain I want you to be able to gauge sensitivity of mindfulness of mental states, mindfulness of mind, not thoughts and emotions that arise within those states, but the state itself, the overall disposition itself, please. And any other predominant subsets. Not a whole bunch of them. Don't go too far with this. This week, just the predominant state and maybe one or two subsets, please. All right. Now, write those down. Take a moment. And see if you can understand this. That whatever thoughts or emotions that you have, so I really want you to highlight the importance of this, that whatever thoughts or emotions that you may be having are so often, not always, because sometimes they're just spontaneous arisings, but sometimes, in fact, I would say most of the time, the thoughts and emotions you are having are literally reflections of this underlying predisposition, And that is a heavy statement I'm making. If you were unaware of this underlying predisposition, you could literally be going along and you could be, I'm telling you, you can be a mindfulness practitioner and you can be aware that there are thoughts and you can be aware that there are emotions and you can be aware of the breath. But everything you do in mindfulness practice, just as in life, can be colored by the pervasive predisposition, and you may be unaware. It's easy to go through life and not even be aware that there is a predisposition. I'm asking you to check in on something that may be, and for many of you, I guarantee is a regular feature of your life that you may not even know is there and has been there perhaps 20 years. It is literally like when we first start practicing mindfulness or breathing with people, and they've been breathing their whole life, and they didn't know what a breath felt like. I mean, they knew intellectually they were breathing, and from time to time in their lives, they could feel their breath, but like they never really paid any attention to it. Like the main thing that supports their very existence. This is like that. This is that kind of depth. What is your predisposition? And to be able to know that, it's not something small. It's not something insignificant. It's so much that when the four foundations of mindfulness that the Buddha taught, his primary teaching, this is the third foundation. The first, mindfulness of breath and body. The second, mindfulness of sensations. The third, we did a little bit of it last week, mindfulness of thoughts and emotions. But this is the overall backdrop of the sacred teaching on mindfulness. It's like, wow. And then most people, just like the other ones, would identify this mental state as belonging to them, or actually saying that this is them. I am angry, or I have anger, as though they are a predisposition, or they are a mood, or I am in a mood, or having a mood. And mindfulness allows you to gain true peace by backing off and recognizing the disposition and being able to name it. And no longer by noting, and this is the key to mental noting, mental naming, by being able to discern with sensitivity how the mind, and this is key, how the mind feels. At every level, we are dealing with nuance that most people would never understand, without going step by step through these practices. How does the mind feel? Not what is the mind thinking, not what emotion are you currently having. Those are already fairly deep questions. This is a different order. How does your mind feel? And so for those of you, like I heard in the background, like all the scurrying around, and like it sounded like someone was in the kitchen and answering phones while they're watching a mindfulness class. That is, for me, it's really funny in a way, because it really points to this whole thing. Like you're sitting here trying to watch, you've taken time out from your day, but it's not enough for you to just watch a mindfulness class. There has to be other activities going on. What do you think? Let's stop for a second. What is that predisposition? What's in the backdrop there? We can't say for sure, but what do you notice? Like you really actually show up for something, a date, a mindfulness class, even a yoga class, a meditation. What is the predisposition? What would you call the predisposition of someone who shows up for a mindfulness class and also wants to juggle 5 or 6 other things at the same time? Like eating, for example, like having a bag of chips with their mic on, maybe a soda or a brownie, and also maybe watching on a different screen, maybe watching the news right now while we're watching this. So instead of judgment, what is that predisposition? Without judgment. And I really want you to see that, like, without knowing that, you could literally your life could be governed by that predisposition. Perhaps anxiety, restlessness. And you could literally think that you have free choice. You could literally believe that you have free will. And you do. But that free will is stunted now if you don't know the backdrop of your mind. If you're uncertain, or if you don't even know that it's there, literally your behaviors, your conduct, your thoughts, your speech, your actions are now clouded by this predisposition. So again, mindfulness of mood, please. Let's see if it's shifted, and let's see if you can note it. What is this? And that is your primary mindfulness of mind question. What is this? What mood is this? Without judgment, please. And to recognize that is not my mood. That is a disposition. Now name it, please. Now, what does that feel like? Right there, that there can be observation of a disposition without being the disposition. That the overall disposition perhaps is restlessness. But what's it feel like to recognize restlessness? What's that like? That there is an awareness of this disposition. What is that awareness like? Because the awareness of the disposition and the disposition are two different things. Just like there's awareness of breathing, awareness of thoughts, awareness of emotions, awareness of sensations. But what is that? What is that like? That awareness that recognizes these things. And in the same way, awareness of the disposition. So what is the point of this on the cushion and off the cushion in direct life? To no longer be governed unconsciously by these underlying predispositions. To no longer be governed. That you begin to recognize the connection between the thoughts that you're having, the emotions that you're having. Whatever it is that you're experiencing is very likely covered by the underlying disposition. It's likely being like co-created, if you will. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. But those things are happening due to the underlying predisposition, is why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. For me, it's very clear. I really received these teachings, but I didn't get the gravity of it until I lived in India and Southeast Asia. And something happened after being away from the United States for a while. For me, and it's not true for everyone, but for me, this is how I gained the recognition of mindfulness of mind or mindfulness of mood, was by being away from the US. I never knew. It's literally like trying to explain to a fish that they're in water. And I never knew what it was like for me. This isn't true for everyone, but it was true for me. And that's what matters, is that you recognize what's true for you. So we don't blame it on a culture. But for me, when I lived in Southeast Asia, not in the city, but out in the country, people don't operate on time. They don't have us. They don't care. They look at, it's almost like the sun governs the day. Like they wake up to chickens and the sunrise, and not really much happens. There's so much time made for relaxation and tea drinking, and really not trying to accomplish anything. It's very strange. It was very strange for me. It's like it's almost like time stood still. It's almost like nothing really transpired. Day after day, it was almost like a continuation of things. And it was a real lack of busyness. And time, again, was not a factor. And smiles on the faces and a gentleness that was pervasive in the culture was my experience. And you talk about culture shock. It wasn't the culture shock of going there. That had its own shock for sure. But the real culture shock was being away for many years and then coming back to the United States and landing at Los Angeles International Airport is when it hit me. And I mean, I was frozen with this because I recognized, and I couldn't put a finger on it at the time, despite the training that I had received. I couldn't put a finger on what is this exactly. It took me a couple of days. I was in shock about it. And it really, when it wasn't culture shock, it was mindfulness of mind shock, is what it was. And what it was I came back to a culture that I experienced as unbelievably tense and filled with angst and filled with frustration and so focused on time and just really hardwired. And as a consequence, what type of thoughts and emotions do you think come from a mind like that? What would your guess be? And how they treat each other and how they treat themselves. If your mind's predominant mental state is called irritation, what if that's the backdrop? What type of thoughts and emotions do you think you're prone to having? Even though we say we have free will, what do you think happens here? And again, not to blame the culture, because not everyone experiences it like that. But I certainly did. I don't now, by and large. I've become not immune to the effects, but guarded to its effects. And that is on purpose. And that type of guarding comes with mindfulness. Like, you understand what poisons the mind, the atmosphere of the mind. And I would like you to start to think of mindfulness of mind as mindfulness of my internal ecosystem. I think that is, as we start to understand this very important practice better and better, the best way for you to understand it. That this is, your mind is an ecosystem, and its overall health is the predisposition, the activities that take place within this Everglades system are the thoughts and the emotions. But the overall health of the ecosystem, your mind, that's what we're talking about. What's it like? And can you back off of that and watch it? Or are you so engrossed in the predisposition that you don't realize that it colors everything? Your relationships, the way that you drive in traffic, thoughts, speech, actions, everything, the way you relate to your family, that everything becomes predominated by this unbelievably important recognition. And that you don't have to be an automaton. You don't have to be a mere reactive to this. That you can see this clearly. And you can, and when you do it, when you see it clearly, that you can become intelligent enough to choose. And this is what we call right effort here. You can choose, but what is it helpful to back off of this state once it's recognized? Because if you don't, what will happen? And you know it. What will happen? And so it's not a judgment of the state, but it's a recognition that if I don't recognize a state and I don't back off, it is very likely, very conceivable, quite possible that all of my thoughts, speech, and actions will now be both colored and perhaps even consumed by the mental state itself, this unhealthy ecosystem. And then conversely, there can be a mental state of peace. And then all of your thoughts, speech, and actions can be colored by that. And I'm not saying that that's the preferable state. I'm just stating that you want to recognize that. And mostly the interactions that people have with each other, this is what they're running into. Some people talk about it, and I have a lot of fun with it, I'm sure that you know, that people talk about it as energy, that this is this person's energy. It's almost like they're trying to detect something, and they can't really put a finger on it. And I have so much fun over the years about what is, can you feel the vibe? Can you feel the energy? And the reason why you can't talk to people about this is because it's in the purvey of a meditator's experience of sensitivity to mind that you can't even get to until there's a mindfulness of breath and sensations without stories, and a mindfulness of emotions and thoughts without stories. This is at the tail end of all of that. I wish it could be front and center, but it's so subtle for most people that they don't see it. And then once it's pointed out, it becomes the biggest game in town. And there are people out there who I've known they've been practicing 30 or 40 years, and they've never heard this before. And if they have, it wasn't given its due, it wasn't given its importance. And again, how to stress something that is so fundamental to your being, that you're living in like a fish in water, that you didn't know was happening. How do you stress something like that to someone that will become so obvious to you, hopefully, starting this week, as we primarily focus on mindfulness of mind this week, that you experientially, not intellectually, begin to just repeat my words or whatever, talk about the importance of it, but to experientially discover that this is quite literally a minefield of potential danger and potential hope, depending on its recognition, completely depending on its non-judgmental and non-personalizing recognition. Okay. So I think that I don't have much more to say, except that it is possible for me that I can go back and forth now from India to Southeast Asia, come back to the US without saying, I like this place better, or I feel more home here in India, or I feel more home in Los Angeles than I do in Florida, or I feel better in Florida than I do in Colorado. You understand, it's not these places. And that's what mindfulness offers you. This idea, and that most people don't get it, because I think some of you can probably relate to this. There's a thing that we call destination addiction, that if I could just go there, I would be happier. If I could just go or be with that person, I would be happier. Someplace different than where we are. And what they're actually reacting to is not a location. You know, seasonal depressional disorder, for example. It's like, I was living in Seattle and I just couldn't take it. I had to move to a sunny state like Florida, you know, and it's like, Florida's going to save me from this. It doesn't happen. It's not true. And Seattle's just fine. The issue is, can you back off? Can you recognize and can you back off the mental state? Otherwise, you know, you can be moving around your whole life trying to find the right place, which is actually not the place, but the disposition. And this is like, you know, behind, and there's all these little aphorisms that are so unhelpful about this. Like, wherever you go, there you are. It's not useful. This is what's useful, to become as sensitive to the way the mind feels. And the reason why you want to know that, again, is to highlight, without this, your thoughts, speech, and actions, your very behaviors, the way you relate to yourself and the way you relate to others in the world, the chances of it not being highly influenced by this state, negligible possibility. This is the action. This is where it's at. All right. So let's take a minute. Let's do a little minute fidget break, silently, please, quietly. Stretch, move around, and then we'll come and do some meditation, and then a little more Q&A after this. So let's take a minute fidget break. Let's just keep the cameras rolling, and we'll come right back. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a seat and upright, alert, comfortable posture. Shoulders back, gently resting on the shoulder blades. Elbows out, please, away from the ribs. One unimpeded breathing. And unless you have a medical need to do so, not using the back of the chair if you're sitting in a chair. Raise the sternum slightly. Tuck your chin in just a little bit. And then lips slightly parted. That'll stop your mouth from drying out during the practice. And your tongue is resting naturally on the upper palate, just behind the teeth. Hands are traditionally in the right hand and the left hand, thumbs together gently, just beneath the navel, or you can have your hands palms downward, underneath your thighs. But again, elbows out, please, away from the ribs. Wonderful. So let's begin. You can gently close the eyes and take a few slow, long, deep, luxuriating breaths, please, all the way down to the abdomen as we begin to meditate on mindfulness of mind. Just giving some care to your posture, maybe doing some little adjustments that are helpful, maybe a little more alignment and balanced, so that your posture helps you to feel perhaps a little more alert. And again, just a few more slow, long, deep breaths. But maybe you can take them in a way that you feel some enjoyment. Perhaps as you exhale, maybe see if you can enjoy that practice of letting the breath out, or the process of breathing in deeply. Just see if you can enjoy breathing in more fully. And perhaps at the end of the exhalation, just letting the feeling linger for a moment. And just enjoy being contented. And then letting the breath return to its natural state. So not trying to control the breath or use any type of pranayama, just letting the breath be the breath. But still with a momentary pause or lingering at the end of each exhalation. And then just make an allowance for the in-breath to arise and appear all on its own. And if it's easy, see if you can adjust your breath so it's more enjoyable. Not forcing it and not controlling it, but just within the range of a natural breath. See if there can be some subtle adjustments that you can make to make it more enjoyable. Perhaps the speed or the weight of the breath. And as you exhale, on the exhalation, see if you can relax or soften that thinking muscle. And begin to thin out the mental activities with each exhalation. Not so much with the predisposition, but the thinning out of the mental activities so that we can more clearly see the predisposition. So calming the mind in a quick way. And sometimes if there's just a lot of thoughts, it's just more difficult to see the underlying predisposition or mood. So perhaps with each exhalation, we can soften and thin out the mental activities. calming that thinking mind, not in a quick way, but just breath by breath, a little massage, just a softening wave through the mind. And you're doing great. With each exhalation, just a little encouragement or a little allowance for letting go of whatever it is you were thinking about. Like you're unveiling, breath by breath, unveiling the mood or the mental state, making it more clear to see. And all around the experience of breathing, just settling around the rhythm of breathing in and the rhythm of breathing out. And not just at the beginning of an inhalation, but all the way through, from the beginning of the inhalation, through the middle, and through the end, to the top of the inhalation. There's a natural pause at the top, and then exhale, thinning out the mental activities. Just letting your body and your mind settle around the experience of breathing. And as you exhale and start to feel more contented, perhaps there can be some enjoyment as you breathe and stay connected all the way through, from the beginning to the middle to the end, with the top of the inhalation, through the pause and through the beginning, the middle, and the end of the exhalation. Stay with it all the way through. And at the end, perhaps some little joy, some enjoyment as you stay connected. And in the process, beginning to unveil the pervasive disposition or overall general mood, without judgment, without trying to change that mood. But there can be a joy in this unveiling. And we can use that joy. We can use the rhythm of breathing to spread it around, to spread these feelings of delight throughout your being. And it could be helpful. You might even try to turn the corners of your lips upward slightly. Regardless of what the disposition is like, regardless of what thoughts are like, regardless of what emotions are like, regardless of whatever may be taking place in your life, there can be an awareness that is contented, that is joyful, that recognizes, that is aware that there is a predisposition, that there are thoughts and there are emotions, there are sensations. And whatever they may be, there can be a recognition and an ease, even if what you're feeling is uneasy. And by truly associating with what's taking place, not disassociating by believing these are your states or identifying too closely with these temporary horizons, we can finally begin to develop a true association with reality. That I am not simply a predisposition or a mood. I am not a bunch of thoughts, changing emotions and sensations. And there's an ease with this, a contentedness. I can be free of a mood. I can be free of a predisposition. And I can begin to relate to my being very differently in a truly associative way by correctly recognizing that I am not this mood. I am not these emotions. Even if they are present, they can be observed without judgment and reactivity. What a fantastic recognition you're having. I am not a mood. Even if that mood seems to be pervading my mind, I can be free of that. Even if that mood is depression or sadness, jealousy, desire, I can observe these things and free myself. Coming back to our overall theme of mindfulness as freedom, freedom from suffering. Breathing in, breathing out. And there's no need to worry about the mind wandering away or making comments on it. We can simply begin again if we fall into that disposition. If we fall into the river of disposition, or thoughts or emotions, we can simply begin again, and we can be delighted and content that you can begin again. We don't need to add any commentary or judgment to this. We can simply readjust our lens of awareness. And we can either close in, or in this case, we can really back off and simply be aware that these are there. Breathing in, breathing out, thinning out the activities. Unveiling the underlying predisposition, the mood, the lighting of the inner ecology of the mind, without trying to change it at all. And to feel the mind, and to feel the awareness of that mind, and the contentedness and the peace and the joy, the ease that comes with even uneasy states. And there is no contradiction that awareness is at ease. What is being aware of may be uneasy. And that's true. There can even be anger. There could even be a display of anxiety. And you can be at ease with that, with those predispositions. You can recognize, as I did, the predominant state of low-grade irritation. And you can be at peace and content in that recognition. And that is not a contradiction. There can even be great pain, even chronic. With an overall mood in the background of sadness. And there can be an awareness of that is contented. But there can truly be ease in the midst of great pain, physical and emotional. And again, that is also not a contradiction. And by doing these practices daily this week, you're preparing yourself for any potential arising, and that you will be confident that you can face anything without trying to hide or run or coming up with some other behavior to get out of something. This is more like recognizing and accepting and naming and investigating joyfully that everything is okay. Ultimately, everything is okay. And how much is that recognition worth to you in terms of a willingness to practice? Instead of scurrying around, perhaps trying to move, going here and going there, always trying to get it right so that you actually do feel the way that you think you're supposed to feel. And instead recognizing that everything is okay right now, as it is, which allows you to make better choices. True free choices, instead of being under the influence of a mood or disposition. Breathing in, breathing out. Gaining an understanding of the beauty of this practice of mindfulness of mind and its implications. And breath by breath, continuing to calm the mental activity. Calming, reacting into any leaning into pleasure or happiness. And with the exhalation, we can calm any unnecessary happiness or pleasure that we may be feeling also. Recognizing there's a deeper contentment than just some momentary feeling of happiness that may come as a byproduct of this meditation. Because that's not what this is about. There's a longer lasting contentment when you don't have a buy-in to any predisposition or mood, including temporary happiness, which is such a moving target, and especially a happiness that often happens with just meditating. What a setup. And that type of meditation practice where you're just looking for a little happiness here or a little pleasure there, honestly is no different than just window shopping and then just walking along and all of a sudden finding an ice cream in your hand. This is no different. Just because you happen to fall in because you're breathing, that you happen to fall into happiness, that's much to do about nothing. That's not the object. There's a greater happiness and freedom that comes with recognizing that happiness is just another predisposition, no different than anger. That one you could be drawn to, you could lean into that happiness in the same way that you could be averse to anger. And there's no difference between those two. That's the leaning mind. But instead we can have an intimation that there's something more lasting and enduring in our practice. And that is awareness. A non-personalizing, non-judgmental awareness. That we can have this intimation of a deeper settledness or peace and a calming of the mental activities. And really intuiting or sensing the possibility of really being here at home, at ease and at peace, really being rooted right here and content. Let's see if you can do that on your own for a couple of minutes. Recognize the difference if you're feeling contented or happy as a mental state that can come often as a byproduct of meditation versus the deeper happiness, the deeper contentment with observing that mental state. Or conversely, if you're feeling at unease, recognizing what that predisposition is. And recognizing there can be a general deeper happiness that recognizes that. A true contentment or an ease with unease, regardless of whatever predisposition may currently be there. Let's try that. I would like you to periodically check in and ask yourself, what is your predominant relationship to what is happening? What's your relationship like to that mental state? For example, you may feel some discomfort. You can also be mindful to your relationship to that discomfort. Are you clinging or are you resisting? And once you notice the relationship, you can hold it in the warmth of your attention. And once you've done that, you can investigate some of the true present moment elements and how you're relating, like how it affects your breathing. Or are there any physical sensations or emotions associated with this? And when we're done, perhaps you can even write down, what are your beliefs behind this? What have been your historical beliefs behind moods? You want to know this. And also, as you notice the relationship, ask yourself if that relationship or attitude represents a way you want to be, or whether it contributes to a sense of dissatisfaction or unease in other areas of your life. And also, please remember, there's no real need for judging, criticizing, or being upset with what you see when you look at your relationship to the present moment, mental state. Even if what you see happens to be unfortunate or difficult. And similarly, there is no need for praise or to get involved with preferred attitudes. That's such a minefield if you do. And most of my beginning students, that is exactly what they do. It's normal. They have preferred dispositions. And it is the bane of their practice because it involves hope and expectation versus non-judgmental observation. In either case, the practice is to be mindful of the relationship or attitude without being for it or against it. And this practice then allows the relationship or attitude to settle naturally when you're not for or against any underlying predisposition. It allows you to relax. And periodically notice the general state of your mind. Does it feel tired or alert? Contracted or expanded? Calm or agitated? Fuzzy or clear? Resistant or eager? Do you feel like you're leaning into it or pulling away? And see if you can just put aside whatever commentary or judgment you might have about the state of your mind. And instead, just use your mindfulness to become aware of that state. And perhaps notice what emotions come with that state. Part and parcel. And more subtly, what is the felt state, the felt sense relationship to that predisposition? And what does it feel like to just step back and observe the state of the mind rather than to be in it? And what happens to your state of mind as you become mindful of it? Feel that. And use the exhalation to soften that relationship. You can soften it up. Soften that relationship so that you can feel more deeply settled. Use the exhalation. And then in the last couple of minutes of the sitting, please familiarize yourself and reconnect simply now with the breathing. Let's come back to just a very simple practice now. Just how does it feel? Sensitive. Sensitive in the body. How does it feel for the body to breathe? The breathing body and the body breathing without trying to control the breath in any way. And before we leave our meditation, let's think of some thoughts of goodwill. Maybe your hands together in Namaste or Anjali. May I be happy. May I be well. May I be safe. May I be peaceful and at ease. And please turn and face your neighbor or someone on the screen. And may you be happy. May you be well. May you be safe. May you be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy. May we be well. May we be safe. May we be peaceful and at ease. And may every living being be happy. And may every living being be well. May every living being be safe. May every living being be peaceful and at ease. And let's think of whatever peace or goodwill we had in this session. And let's dedicate it specifically to someone you know who's suffering, physically, emotionally, mentally. And let's please dedicate our practice, but the intention, the energy, the well-meaning of our practice may it make their way to that person. Please think of their name, Stephen. And may you be the beneficiary of my efforts. May we all find peace in our lives. And before you open your eyes, please remember there's a skill to opening your eyes after you've meditated. Try not to let your awareness go flowing out into the world. Just please at least maintain some sensitivity, both to the body and mood, to what's going on. Even as you stretch and as you move, perhaps you can pick a point in the body, some sort of home base to try to stay in touch with, to stay grounded in this present moment. And gently, please take a minute or two, stretch, turn to pen and paper, write down your observations. Slow movements, please, nice and quiet. Feel free to unmute your buttons as long as you're not banging around and we can all hear you. So I would like if you could just stay focused on this topic. And we'll take some questions and we'll go through some exercises for the week that we can all do besides this meditation, which has been recorded. Or can they just do? Okay. So if anybody has a question or a thought out there, first, please unmute and whatever you wish, or any observations that you have, misunderstandings. And please don't feel too shy. I know some of you have emails that your classes feel shy. I know we have a lot of people watching, that you're being heard by a lot of people. That's true, but you'd probably be helping people if you have thoughts or questions.
I have one comment, Michael. This is Rose.
Hi, Rose. Are you in Minnesota?
I am in St. Paul. It's nice and cold here today.
Well, I'm in sunny Los Angeles right now. So
oh, lucky you.
Yeah.
My comment is simply to say how what a creative process this is of getting in touch so deeply, with such a subtle thing. For me, because I write poetry, it's very much like that. Having a sort of non-judgmental observation at a very subtle event or occurrence or field of awareness. Yeah. So very creative. It was lovely.
Great, wonderful. Really happy to hear. And thanks for that feedback. Yeah, sensitivity to the mind. It's something that most people would never consider. Not to what you're thinking or what the emotion is that you're experiencing, but a sensitivity to the overall mood and predisposition, the inner ecology of the mind. What else? And to realize that colors, that colors our thoughts, our speech, our action. It colors everything, how we relate. And if you don't know that, it's literally like you can say that you have free choice. You could even be a mindfulness practitioner that recognizes thought, speech, and action, but you'd be recognizing something within that mental state. And that's the funny thing, is that you literally could be a practitioner of so much of mindfulness, but then not understand what the thoughts and the emotions that you're recognizing, why they are there and what they are associated with. Why those types of thoughts and emotions are so predominant? Maybe because of the predominant, and I'm going to guess, they are because of the predominant underlying mood. And to not know the mood and to know that you can be free of the mood is to not know that you could also be free of the underlying associations. All right. So what else?
Michael, it's Jenny.
Hi,
I noticed we were practicing that I felt like I was jumping from RA to end, naming and labeling the mood.
Yeah.
So as you practice more, will you become more adept at sensing and just recognizing the mood before me recognizing, labeling, or almost happening instantaneously?
Yeah, I think slow it down. I think instead of so quickly, maybe just one. You can do a couple of inhalations and exhalations in between at least. So it's not just so immediate. I have my experience is not to trust the immediacy if it's all coming really rapidly, but just take the time to recognize and to feel, and to not want to capture the recognizing and the accepting and the naming and investigating so quickly. I consider each of these things to be an unfolding process, and that my rush for it to all be an immediate arising is too quick. It doesn't allow for the sensitivity of this experience. So I do think that it's correct at first. There's a tendency for it all to come together, sort of glom on together rapidly. But I think that there can be an appreciation made for, and I guess, patience, and allowing these things to come together in a more relaxed fashion. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Michael?
Yes.
It's Joelle. Just a sort of a question. Do you find that people have tendencies to certain almost clusters of these mental states, and does this tie in some way to maybe our imperative statements and
Yes. Again, there are these clusters. I would like you to try and become sensitive to the most predominant one. I don't disagree that there are other subsets you can call a cluster, if you will, but what is most predominant, and to begin to see that there are other aspects. So, for example, many of you have probably understood in your life emotionally that when you have seen someone else who appears to be angry, and that, let's say, that person is your child, that you recognize, you're so sensitive to that person that when they're angry, that what you're actually experiencing regarding this cluster idea is that you understand that there are some subsets to it. This person is probably, the underlying subset is fear, or that they care deeply. And this is merely their outer expression. So using that metaphor on yourself, that yes, does it seem like it's multi-layered? Certainly, but let's go ahead and take the time to recognize what seems to be most predominant, and then recognizing what seems to be subordinate to that predominant thing, and perhaps recognize that they actually go together. They're part of a connectivity. Okay?
okay.
Now, with regard to the imperative statements that we talked about at the end of last week's class, which if you haven't seen, I highly recommend that you watch. So I invite you all, of course, to end, at every, right on time every week. But if you can, when these classes are over, if I've gone over, see if you can come back, because a lot of really good things are often talked about afterwards. And so last week we talked about imperative statements, which are underlying statements, which are true, what Joelle was saying. These are our thoughts, these are our emotions, our sensations, including whole imperative statements like early bird gets the worm, got to get up early, got to make the money. I mean, what do you think that mental state is like with that imperative? Joelle?
Well, I would think that would go back to what you were talking about, that tenseness, that being, always just sort of on the go and needing to be somewhere. And
right. This is this helicopter mom or soccer mom thing that you've heard about, obviously. You just got to keep going and going and going. And with that as the pervasive attitude, you can see like all of your thoughts and emotions, the bodily sensations are truly becoming subsets of the predisposition, the overall mood that you're in. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
now, collectively, we refer to this, in Buddhism, is the second, which we'll study more of in coming years, as dependent co-arising, or the second noble truth. You begin to see the conglomeration of these things and how they all interact. And so right now what we're doing is we're separating these things, and we're separating the mood, and we're separating the emotion, and we're separating the thoughts, and we're seeing the parts of the puzzle so that we don't live in this automaton, this very robotic way, according to an underlying predisposition or an imperative that we weren't even aware was happening, even though it is the most predominant feature of our very lives. And we just didn't see it because it's a mental state. It's invisible. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. What else?
Hi, Michael. This is Chris in Denver. Can you hear me?
Can you speak up just a little bit, Chris?
Is this a little better, Michael?
That's much better. Thank you.
Excellent. So I've got a good rookie question for you.
Go ahead. I don't care if it's a rookie question, but a little more clear. You were clear and then you faded out.
Okay, I'll give it another try. If I'm not my thoughts,
If I'm not my thoughts,
I'm not my emotions,
not my emotions,
and I'm not my mood,
not my mood,
and if reality is often clouded by my thoughts,
and if reality is often clouded by these things, then
who am I and what is reality?
who am I and what is reality? Really important questions. This is a foundational mindfulness class. And I would also like to know, is there a God? And what will I eat for breakfast 3 weeks from now? If you could help me with that. I'm having fun. But those are questions that we will be getting to. Your questions are important. But right now, I think the task at hand, this is already, I think you would agree, really important and really deep and really going to take some practice. As a result of doing these practices, rather than answering your questions right now philosophically, I believe that these practices will begin to bear experiential fruit and you will come to see the answers for yourselves. Although in coming classes, after this foundational series, we'll be addressing those things philosophically as well. But I would hope that you, through these practices, you begin to uncover these answers experientially as well. Okay?
Michael, this is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi. I was just wondering, again, it is really subtle what you're talking about here. And as you know, I'm not so good with subtlety. The disposition versus the mood. Like today, I was basically full of anxiety. A couple of things happened and
Look how you identified that as I'm full of anxiety.
right.
What would it
So
be like to say that there was anxiety?
There was anxiety in my life today.
Again, see what you did. Just catch that. I want everyone to catch that. He said there was anxiety. Instead of saying I have anxiety, now there was anxiety in my life. Let's step back away from that, Mike. This is what we're
Okay.
There was anxiety.
Okay. Yeah.
Predominance is the predominant state.
Predominant state.
Without owning it as being I or mine. Okay. Go ahead.
All right. So is that what you're talking about in terms of predominant, the backlighting,
Yes.
as opposed to a mood?
That is what we're talking about as being, I'm describing these things as synonymous. Okay. A mood or a predisposition to backlighting. True.
Okay.
And I'm saying that, it's what Joelle was just talking about. There can be a primary one. And so that you don't get mixed up in our terminology, so it's not confusing to you. I'm saying that there are also subsets. So there is a mood and it comes with, subsets, we'll say. So if like the predominant light is white, and then there are also green and red lights, like a Christmas scene.
Right.
Okay?
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Hey,
But hopefully you got that clarification, Mike, that that mindfulness recognizes there are mental states without personalizing them.
Yes. I'm a beginner, Michael. I'll work on it.
That's what we're all here for. We're all here. We're all beginners. This is foundational class. This is not something that most people consider or think of, that there can be a recognition. So really, I'm happy that you're asking these questions. They're very helpful to other people too. Okay? Go ahead.
Hi, Michael. It's Carla.
Hi, Carla.
Okay. I think Michael's question started to answer what my question was, but I was noticing towards the end of the meditation that there was dullness and tiredness. And I guess my question is that the subtlety we're looking for, or is that, like you were saying a few minutes ago, a subset of a more predominant or more pervasive?
There's no way of knowing. I can't answer that. What you have to do is practice what is most predominant, because there are times where dullness is predominant as a meditator. And there are times that you're aware and alert, and then dullness is a subset. So it's sometimes it's predominant, sometimes it's a subset, and it changes. And so, but the key thing is what you just did is great, is that you didn't say I was dull or I fell into dullness.
Well, I think Michael helped me with that quite a bit.
My beginner Mike helped you as an advanced. So thank you, beginner Mike. No one's advanced or beginner. We're all here in the present, and let's have a lot of fun with this too. Okay. All right. So thank you.
I thought I heard you say that there were these moods can change from moment to moment, the predominant mood, or is it something that's a little bit more global, like
more global? Yeah, these moods that I'm talking about are generally not changing from moment to moment, but more of something that is a more enduring. I don't want to say permanent state, of course.
No, you don't want to say that.
Right, but literally, can become primary and predominant throughout the course of a day, a week, a month, several years. Even without people noticing.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question.
Great.
Thanks.
Yeah. What else?
Michael,
Yes.
is there a correlation between this predominant mood or disposition and our imperative statements? Is there some connection there at all?
Yes, and we literally just had the question again for everyone is there a connection between the mood and our imperative states, which is the question that Joelle literally just asked a few minutes ago.
Okay, and I was just spacing, sorry.
That's okay, not a problem. But I do want you to know that we did just cover that question, and we did answer it in the affirmative that there is in fact a connection between those things. And I use the example of the imperative, it's a very typical American imperative.
Right. Yeah.
Early bird gets the worm. Got to get up early. The more money I make. The harder I work, the more money I make. The more money I make, the happier I'll be, or the more contented I'll be, the more safe I will be. And then what do you think is, if those are imperative statements, what do you think the backdrop is in terms of the overall mental state? So you can probably see the tension, the underlying tension and restlessness in that background, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you can begin to see the relationship. And of course, what is the physical tension like? Right. And what happens to the breath in conjunction with these things? That we're literally creating a world of our own suffering and not even aware that we're doing it and believing that we have free will.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. So in other words, to be unaware of the overall underlying mood or predisposition, the ecology of the mind, is to literally to enslave yourself to that disposition.
Well, I felt really enslaved to my imperative statements last week when they finally came to me pretty quickly what they were for me.
Sure.
And I felt rather enslaved to that.
Yeah. And this process is like that. It is like uncovering and unveiling one thing after the next. And as Trungpa Rinpoche so aptly stated it, when he was asked, what is meditation? And I don't think this is true in the end, but I do think it was true in the beginning and the middle, that it is, as he described it,
One insult.
One insult after the next. And I think as long as you're willing to go through that process and know and at least trust and maybe intimate that there is light at the end of this tunnel, then it allows you to keep going. And unfortunately, for everyone who's this mass of people who are taking these classes right now, I can tell you right now, the Pandora's box has been opened, and there's just no way. Even now, in these early stages, there's no way of putting the cover back on that Pandora's box and acting like these things that you haven't recognized them now. It's too late. And you may drift off from practice for a little while, but you'll be back, I promise. I've been watching this little game for 30 years now. So nobody likes, I'm trying to say that nobody likes what they see, but that's okay. No one comes in and, what you realize is, what people realize is, the more the attention that they pay for a while, that they realize that they're highly neurotic. And no one recognizes it. I've never known anyone in the beginning and intermediate stages who looks at these things and says, boy, I really have my mental shit together. Okay, so keep
Yes.
going. What else? Any other, one or two more questions?
Michael,
Yeah.
Confusion.
Who is this, Lynn?
This is Lynn. Yes,
All right.
yes. Confusion is here between that backdrop and a pattern, maybe an overall pattern.
Okay.
So often I see myself, back in a certain position, or like isolated.
Yes.
And I think, what? Again? Or I think still? Or is that related?
Yeah.
Or is that
mindful? We can call it, literally, that there can be an awareness that confusion is present. And to recognize that, and there can be in the midst of great confusion and doubt, that we literally, these are mental states that we recognize. These are predominant mindfulness of mind themes, that there can be mindfulness of confusion. There can be mindfulness of doubt. Like, I don't even know what I'm doing. I sit down to practice and I thought I understood this class, and I go and do it on my own. And I just feel like, I don't know, am I doing this right? And these states, I think that when people, my experience is that when people have doubt or confusion with regard to practice instructions, that it's never about the practice instructions. The more that I poke and I prod and I get people to investigate, that what always seems to happen is that confusion is a predominant state in other areas of their life, that they feel like this a lot. And it's never, in counseling or in meditation practice, not as theory, but as experience, that whatever it is that you're experiencing in meditation primarily, generally the primary predominant thing that's been happening all day or for whole periods of your life. And so people say, oh, it's the meditation, or it's this relationship, or it's this job. And I think what you'll begin to uncover, Lynn, and everyone else, is it's not the job, it's not the relationship, it's not the meditation session. In terms of mindfulness practice, you're actually doing the thing that we talk about. You're actually recognizing that there is confusion. Now, instead of going around saying, I'm confused, or I'm in a constant state of confusion, pardon me, then what we're doing here is something very different. Instead, what we're doing is recognizing that there is confusion. And by recognizing that, there can be literally a joy or an ease with recognizing that there is doubt or a confusion that's predominant. And that you don't have to. You can literally say to yourself, confusion, or doubting. And you don't have to do anything else with it. Now, think about what happens, everyone, if you don't do this. Then the thoughts, because of the underlying mental state, the predisposition, the mood of confusion, what kind of thoughts begin to erupt? And emotions begin to erupt with that seem to confirm that, yes, I am indeed confused. And so the freedom that this entails to back off and to recognize that there is a mental state called confusion, and that it's okay. And listen to Jenny, what Jenny said, that there can be recognition and there can be an allowance that it's okay that it's there. We can even name it confusion. And we can even investigate how it feels when there is confusion. And that we can separate, we can find freedom in the midst of doubt. We can find freedom in the midst of confusion. And people say, this sounds hard, but it's not. Look at the alternative in any case. Even if this were hard, look at the alternative, which is to live a life in confusion and submersed in doubt. And always wondering, am I in the right place? Am I in the right situation? And so even if this were hard, that's impossible.
Right. Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's worth your effort. Okay. If you have other questions or thoughts, please do email. I would like you to leave some time for you to, I know there's a lot of groups watching right now, and I would like to leave time for you to all meet together and to ask questions within the group that I wasn't able to get to because of time, and for you to connect with your communities, your Sangha. But I would like to also, again, Hannah and other people are doing a great job, Christian, on our website. We're getting it straightened up, but it is in process. But the questions, Joelle and Joelle, a lot of people are involved in this. But there are quizzes for last week, the test, the class notes, everything is online, and this will be up online quickly as well. So and we have found meditation instructors for almost everyone at this point. If we have not yet found you, and I know that there's a couple of people out there, but if there's more of you, if you could please just email me once more directly. I just want to make sure that everyone has a meditation instructor. So with regard to the meditation instructors, if you are taking this class as audit, you don't need one. And we're not even offering one because we don't have enough. But if you are taking this for teacher training, it is imperative that you do, in fact, have a meditation instructor and that you check in with them each week. And what they are doing is they're looking at the homework questions, and they're looking at the meditation assignments. And that is what they're checking in with you about. It's not just some, hey, let's check in, how's meditation going, how's life? They're literally making sure that you are doing the practices and that you know what you're doing, okay? And for the teachers out there who don't have MIs, the teachers, not the teacher trainees, people who are already teachers who are taking this, I'm gonna probably just have you guys connect. And I'll provide emails for each other so you guys have someone to talk to as well, okay? So just little assignments this week. I would like you to be able to choose an activity, something that you do on a daily basis. So how you can begin to uncover what these predominant states are. So here are some really easy to use guidelines. So first thing is to choose an activity that you do on a daily basis. It can be driving to work, preparing breakfast, reading email, whatever. And just for 1 week, as you do this chosen activity, just become aware of your state of mind, please. How does your state of mind influence how you relate to that activity? Become aware of the state of mind with some just seemingly innocuous, meaningless activity that you do, driving to work. And what is that mental state like? Then how does that state of mind influence how you relate to that activity? And then try to keep a log of your changing states over the week. And look at the role of that mental state in how you do the activity. And that is the best way to practice mindfulness of mind, off the cushion. So that's one thing that you can do. Again, that was a chosen activity, something that you do all the time, and you become aware of that state of mind. And then how does that state of mind influence how you relate to that activity? I'm so happy we're doing this. This is beautiful work. I can't believe how many people are involved in this, engaged in this. Just lovely. This is supposed to be very deep and deep teaching and sensitive and something that most people don't get to. And we're all doing this en masse together. So it's really quite special. And I hope that you know that. The second thing that you can do is consider an ordinary activity that you do that helps you to have a good state of mind. Are there certain activities that you do that you think when I do these, it puts me in a good state? And this week, see if you can try to emphasize doing that activity more and become more mindful of what that state of mind, how it impacts you mentally, emotionally, cognitively. And perhaps see if there's some way that you can realistically maintain that state, even after you finish the activity. Or is it activity dependent? That's what I'm asking you. And again, if you are not getting all of this, and I can't write fast enough, we have class notes that will be up on the website rather rapidly that you can go back and review. Okay. And then the last one, and this is probably the most important for all of us, is to think of someone that you have regular conversations with, please. Maybe a good friend, family member, a husband, a wife. And maybe let them know what you're doing. Not necessarily we need their input, but maybe let them know what you're doing. And what I want you to see is that when you have a conversation with this person, see if you can feel what is the most common attitude that you operate under with this person. Your mom, if your dad, your child, what's the most common attitude that you operate under? What's that mental state like? And how do those attitudes, once you uncover them, how do they influence what you do? How you treat them and how you speak to them and how you relate to them? And then maybe you know someone that you have differing views, perhaps politically. Maybe you know someone who's in, what's that party? Republican. Maybe you know someone like that. Or Democrat, whatever the case may be. And why don't you check out your mental state, your predisposition, please? Not your thoughts, again, not your emotions. What is the underlying predominant state? And how does that change, that predominant state? How does that change? How does that color or influence your behaviors and your thoughts and your speech around them? And then finally, for extra special bonus credit, for those of you who want to become enlightened. If you don't want to become enlightened, don't write this part down. This is only for those who want to become enlightened. Okay. It's like all of you are writing. That's good. Here's this. I want you to sit down with the person that you call yourself. And I want you just to think about yourself. Just to hold an image of yourself in mind. When you do that, what is the predominant mental state? What is the mood or disposition when you think about you? Without judgment, without personalizing it, it's going to be interesting. I just want you to notice when you think about the subject matter that you call yourself, and maybe you can even do it in front of a mirror. What is the predominant mental state, please? What is that disposition? And how does that tend to affect you and how you relate to yourself? In terms of the way that you self-talk and the way that you emote and the way you feel about your own being. And perhaps you may have never noticed, and most people don't, that when they think about themselves, a predominant mental state arises. And sometimes this hits them like this type of class, this type of experience hits them literally like a truck, like a brick, like just running into a brick wall. That this state has been there so long and so pervasive. And that then all of their thoughts and the way that they feel about themselves is so colored. And that all of a sudden there can be this freedom from recognizing that when I think about this thought called myself, that I can be free of that mood. I can be free of that mental state and all the thoughts and the judgments, perhaps, that go along with that. Now that is the depth of this practice. And I'm not expecting that we get there this week, but I would like you to start tasting how deep this could possibly go. So that is all for tonight. I want to stop there. I think we're largely on time somehow, unbeknownst to me how I managed to pull that off. But if you can have a few minutes together with your community, I would appreciate that. And look forward to your emails and your responses. And we'll connect next week. Next week will be our final class in the series. This was class 5 of our 6-part series. Next week, we'll focus on mindfulness of awareness itself. So I don't know how on earth I'm introducing this in an introductory class, but I have decided that I would like to, just like this class. So I hope this was valuable to you and worth it. And thank you for being here. Let's dedicate the merit, which is at the end of your aspirations, please. And by this merit, may all obtain omniscience, and may it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. Thank you so very much for being here. I really enjoy all this. I appreciate this is my life's work, and thank you for the opportunity. Our community does function by generosity and donation only. If you would like to leave a donation, you can leave on the Facebook page. Or any of our Facebook pages. You can go back and you can see that we have donation buttons. You can also leave on our website, which is actually more helpful for us. We don't take very much of a loss that way. But in any case, we do appreciate your generosity. It is how we are able to go around to all of our different communities and teach these things. And higher quality of our production is coming rapidly. Hopefully it's already improving on your end, but it is happening. And as soon as we just got all the equipment in and we're about to set it all up. So with a whole bunch of community effort. And so thank you. And if you're not involved in that, I encourage you to get involved because we are doing this as a community. And for those of you who are watching, I appreciate your patience and your understanding that this stuff doesn't happen overnight. Thank you so much. Be well.